A lot of folks lie to their partner because they're afraid of how they might react. That is why a lot of people lie to their partners. They're just afraid of how they might react. They're afraid about upsetting their partner, so they lie instead of being honest. Silly fool, silly fool.
It doesn't matter how you feel.
I've felt some very fearful moments. Let me tell you, just as a human being, two of the scariest moments I've ever had. The first was when I first got caught by the cops with weed my senior year of high school. That was the scariest. Cops, let me say, I was being silly. I was pulled over in a park area, rolling a blunt, and I was with a homie, and essentially cops just pulled up right behind us as I'm rolling a blunt. Very, very silly. When I had to go home and tell my mom, and this is like early senior year too. This is like October, of your senior year of high school. I'm like, Mom, yeah, last night was in the back of the car. Cop let me go, didn't take me in or anything because it was a very small amount. But having to go home and tell your moms that you are in trouble for some shit like that is, nobody ever wants to disappoint their mom, I think, at least in my opinion. Why would you ever want to disappoint your mom? So that was very much one of the I was afraid. Like, I didn't want to go home and tell her that, like, man, I'm a I gotta go to court for some drugs or some dope. You know, them old heads call dope. But that was one of the scariest moments for me, having to tell my mom that. One of the other most just scariest moments for me as an adult was having to tell my wife that, man, I'm a failure and ain't no way in hell I'm gonna pass this econ program because I'm a failure. That was one of the scariest moments for me because up until that moment, I don't think my wife had ever seen me fail at anything. I had never let her down. I hadn't let myself down. And I had to be open about that. And I had to let her know. That was scary. And something happened to me in that moment. When I say something happened, literally, I remember being just afraid. My wife had no clue how bad I was failing. And I was like, man, how is she gonna react when I tell her that not only did I take out tens of thousands in debt for a graduate degree, I'm a failure and won't have a degree to show in return. That's some fear. I can't say it enough. I remember we were in Amsterdam at our apartment. We had like the true that I am, I waited until after our vacation to tell her. We went to Spain. I was like, I'm not bringing this up until we get back from vacation. Let me be clear. We went to Malaga. We stayed in Marbella. We was there for a week. We hit Ronda, Granada, Gibraltar. We was on that Costa del Sol. Great time. I definitely didn't want to bring this up before that trip. Fear versus faith. Before we continue though, great time to mention this Old Hillside, man. Old Hillside Centennial bottle. This is a 101, man. Signed by the founders themselves. Proceeds going to help a great cause. I got a couple bottles because I wanted to see what she was tasting like. Pause. Old Hillside. Shout out to them folk, man. Great product. It's going to be in the stores on the regular here very, very soon, if not already. Shout out to Old Hillside. Being the true that G is, man, he waited until after they got back from the vacation to let wifey know. So I remember sitting at the table like, and failed everything. And so upon failing everything, I was like, look, man, explained it, told her I hadn't passed one class. And when I tell you, it was a very emotional moment. I'm definitely crying. I'm in tears, arguably uncontrollable. I felt like just unworthy. And I was so afraid in that moment. This is also why I say, having a partner is so important because depending on your partner, when you have these types of moments, it can make a big difference. For me personally, I was so afraid of having to tell my wife that this was the reality and that I was a failure. And a large part of why I was so fearful was because I was sitting here afraid, thinking about how she might react. Now, if I go on a side note, on a tangent here, man, a lot of folks lie to their partner because they're afraid of how they might react. That is why a lot of people lie to their partners. They're just afraid of how they might react. They're afraid about upsetting their partner, so they lie instead of being honest. Silly fool, silly fool.
It doesn't matter how you feel.
You gotta be honest. You gotta be honest. Can't be out here lying to people, expecting positive outcomes. You gotta be honest. And so when I told my wife how I was feeling, I'm gonna be 1,000%. I had no clue what to expect from her. I'm thinking she might divorce me because I'm a failure. I'm not bringing anything to the table. I don't know what's going to happen here. What ended up happening, whoa, I don't know what even kind of automobile that is. What ended up happening, my wife, let me take a step back, because as I'm speaking to my wife and I'm having this emotional moment, something happens. And I expressed this verbally because I felt it. It went through my entire body from head to toe. And I told my wife in this moment, like, I don't know what just happened, but I felt something. It almost was like I tapped into the superpower, like I had converted over. Like it's the moment where everything changed for me personally. We were at that dinner table or at that dining room table in Amsterdam, and I'm sitting here having this conversation with my wife, and in my lowest of moments, she's comforting me, she's holding me, and I felt something from head to toe, and I'll never forget it. And it was in that moment where I said, you don't have anything to be afraid of. No need to be afraid. A large part of why I was in such pain and just like discomfort was because I was so afraid. I was afraid of failing. I was afraid of getting divorced. I was afraid of what I was going to do in the future. I was afraid of what I would do after I was going down this spiral of fear-based decisions. It was within those moments where the ship turned and the sails went in a different direction. Fear versus faith. I had realized in that moment how I had been moving in fear versus pursuing things, having faith in myself and my ability. That was when it changed. Up until that moment, I had fallen into a trap of making decisions because I was afraid of what would happen if I didn't do something else. I was afraid of what would happen. I didn't necessarily have faith in what I would achieve. I didn't necessarily have faith in my abilities. I made decisions because I was afraid of what might happen. It's not a good way to make decisions. It's a terrible way to make decisions. No. And it took me hitting that moment where I had failed, where then I'm being comforted by my wife. And it's crazy too, because while being comforted by her, I said to myself, if she leaves you, so what? You still that man. You still that